Hi, and welcome to today's webinar discussing the best practices for identifying gaps in attainment and personalising learning. My name is Haylie, and I'm going to be going through this with you today. Now, as a teacher, you'll probably already know there's a number of different ways of doing this, but the main theme that we all tend to follow is we assess, we teach, they learn, we plan from that learning, and then the whole cycle starts over again. What you probably don't already know is that EducationCity has that covered. To manage progress with assessments, we have a number of assessments to help you do this. We have assessments that can be used for formative and summative purposes and unit tests to cover different topics in maths. We can help you to personalise learning, from the differentiated assessments that we have available right through to setting different work for different students through our grouping and My Cities. We help for differentiated instruction. So once you've got all those results together, you can have a look in the success tracker to see, okay, who needs that extra support, who needs more help, and where you need to personalise that learning. And best of all, with all of the tools that we actually have available, we can help you save so much time in your planning and in your paperwork that you can get back to where you're meant to be, in the classroom with your kids. So as teachers, we identify gaps and we personalise learning. But why do we do this? Well, it's certainly not for the extra paperwork. It's because each of the students that we have in our classes are very different. And why else would we be teachers if we didn't want every single child in our class to achieve their absolute best? In fact, in 2008, the Department for Children, Schools and Families produced a guide to support schools implementing personalised learning, helping them to move from a system-based and progression underpinned by assessment for learning and with relevant interventions such as one-to-one, booster groups or intervention groups. It stated that personalised learning is central to raising standards and is critical in working towards a society where a child's chances of success are not limited by their socioeconomic background, gender, ethnicity or disability. We try to do this, but you know as well as I do, it can all be very time consuming. That's why at EducationCity we've put together some best practices for identifying gaps in attainment and personalising learning to try and help you along a little bit. Tip number 1, discussion. Discussions or debates are a really good way of assessing understanding in your class or being able to identify any misconceptions that are there. Using open-ended questions to test knowledge are really useful as well. But encouraging students to link their answers with real-life situations or put things into context will show you that they understand what they're saying. They're not just reeling off information. Something I really used to enjoy using was the 1, 2, 3 show me method, where you would give your students a question, and then they'd have a little bit of time to write their answers on a whiteboard. Then you'd say 1, 2, 3, show me. And the children would have to hold up their whiteboards to show you their answers. It's a really good way of immediately assessing who understands it and who doesn't, who's going to need that extra support, or who's got a misconception that you need to address. Tip number 2, next step questioning. This is ideal for if you want to differentiate or personalise instruction. It's probably something that we all do anyway in our day-to-day teaching and in our marking as well. But it's really, really useful of encouraging students to take ownership of their learning. Asking questions about next steps can be done in so many different ways. At EducationCity, we have something called Think It's, and these are perfect in that next step, in-depth learning and understanding. Tip number 3, self or peer assessment. Again, this is something that we probably all do anyway, but this will let students identify areas where they themselves think that they need support or where a peer does. One tip that I used to use all the time was magpieing. In fact, I used to stop the class mid-task and ask them just to stand up and wander around and have a look at each other's work. It's really useful because they really start to pick out the best bits in their peers' work, and then they can apply it to their own. So it's sort of peer teaching and self-assessment linked to one. Tip number 4, feedback. As mentioned previously, verbal or written feedback for the whole class or group of students or even individuals is absolutely essential for a student to understand where they've gone wrong and to be able to start to address their own misconceptions. It's invaluable when identifying gaps in personalising learning. And as I said, teachers probably do this already. It's something that we do. Now here at EducationCity, we have revision journals that are created after a child has done certain assessments. They're independent revision journals because they only contain the information that the child has got incorrect in that test. Therefore, they can be used for extension activities, for home learning, and they're amazing for parental engagement so that parents can see what areas their child needs to work on. Tip number 5, make the lesson relatable. Give students more context for understanding any gaps that they might have. Saying a question such as Jack has walked 4 miles to the telephone box, then 3.5 miles to Jill's house, will probably have half of your class wondering what on earth is a telephone box. Instead of answering the calculation, they'll miss the method or the objective entirely. A great example of this is when I was teaching. I had a little boy who was very good at maths, couldn't understand the bus stop method. I dug into it deeper and it turns out he'd never seen a bus stop with a shelter. And this was the thing that was puzzling him. So using language that is more relatable, more familiar to them, such as a subs bench or a pony shelter, might be a little bit more useful to that child in understanding the method that you're trying to teach. As I said before, that old cycle can be very monotonous and quite laborious. But EducationCity can help. During assessments, we have tools that are ideal for ensuring students' understanding. You can assess and then track students' progress to provide support where needed. For your planning, we have tools that you can use to plan ahead of yourself to try and reduce that stress, but also focus planning for those students that need that support. In your teaching, we have so many resources that you can use for different lessons. And then in the learning, the different resources that children will use will provide continuity and fluidity throughout their learning process. The vibrant resources will engage students in a very different way to they're used to, but a good way at that. So feel free to get in touch. I hope you found this webinar useful, but if you have any questions about this or EducationCity and would like to know more about the tools and resources that we have to offer, please get in touch. We look forward to hearing from you.